Back in my school days, growing up in England, I remember the introduction of a thing called the five-star award system for athletics. Our author today knows that I'm giving away my age in saying that, but you guys know already that I'm ancient. For every athletic discipline, there were a series of performance levels, which varied according to your age. Your ability at these events would determine whether you got awarded a one star, two star, three, four, or the coveted five-star certificate. I remember being able to get to three stars, but never getting beyond that. But checking all the times and the events to see whether I'd be able to get the next upgrade at the next trial at school. It sounds like a fantastic system. I had completely forgotten about it until I was reminded by David Chalfen, the author of the book that we're going to cover today. Hi, and welcome to Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running, or maybe inspire you to try something new or different. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk today with author David Chalfen about his book, A Few More Laps.
A Few More Laps is a compilation of stories and thoughts about high-level distance running and training. The book starts with a little bit about David and how he started running and his experience in the club environment in the UK. Later, it takes a deep dive into several areas David was exposed to through running and coaching, including the path to international level running and how it can be hard to make that final leap, some history, and David's experience setting up a training camp in Kenya, which was interesting, and stories and thoughts from his long coaching career and some other experiences he had being an agent. A little bit about David. David is a runner and a coach with over 40 years of experience and 20 years in coaching with a focus on long distances up to the marathon. Although he doesn't want to be known as a marathon coach, which maybe he's going to tell us why later. In recent years, he has coached more sub 225 marathoners than perhaps any other current UK coach and currently coaches up to national elite level, 28-minute 10K to 2 hours, 15-minute marathons. Qualified at level 4, which is, there are 4 levels basically in the UK athletics coaching system. So he's the highest level, which is performance specialized in 10K to marathon. He has extensive and diverse practical experience to support the formal qualifications. Formerly, he was one of England athletics area coach mentors in endurance. He has managed numerous elite runners, both African professionals and Great Britain and internationals, at big city marathons such as Berlin, Istanbul, Seville, and Lahore. Alan is probably giggling over there because I probably mispronounced that.
I think it's Lahore, but that's
I
okay.
knew it. Okay.
That's
Yeah, of
okay.
course.
Loughborough is coming up in the conversation. That should be interesting.
Wait,
How you pronounce
I'm
that?
I'm gonna make sure that I make you ask that question. Um, but moving on, David has also acted as England Marathon national team manager. A Few More Laps is not even David's first book. He also wrote Improve Your Marathon and Half Marathon Running. So welcome to the podcast, David, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So I guess the first question would be, because we know what a big undertaking writing a book is. So how did you decide to write this one?
Okay, yeah. So yes, it's a pretty big undertaking. I suppose the simple first thing was I had the time, so that helps. And one way or another, I mean, I had a book done about a decade ago, very different book, kind of straightforward coaching book. And I've done bits and pieces of journalism about the sport over the years, both historically a bit of printed stuff, and then more recently kind of online things. And immodest as it all sounds, I mean, I got good feedback on how I write about the sport. And so one way or another, I've been in the sport. You kind of gave quite a bit of information about what I've seen, where I've been within the sport. So o over the course of pretty much all of my life, from age 9 when I started watching it, I've kind of been in it and seen a lot and thought about it, and quite a lot of fairly intense, extreme, entertaining, disturbing things that I think are of interest, and therefore that I think people will be keen to read about. Like life in a way. Like life goes in all sorts of different directions, and so in a way does the book. So there's a bit about me, although I don't think too much about me. Um, there's a lot about other people, um, and there's a lot about. I mean, I think a lot about the sport of interest is the culture, the social stuff that both at any given time, and tracing it from this sort of late 70s, early 80s. So it's always kind of aroused my curiosity about why is it how it is, and why does it change as it does. So cumulatively, I thought I've got enough things, enough ideas, enough content that I can make a book out of it, and I think I can do a good job of doing so. Hence putting it all together, editing, proofreading, um, working with all the profiles of any depth in the book. They're all with the consent of people I know and have known. So yeah, it was a lively project, bringing in the other people and working out their profiles, their kind of points of interest. So that's how it came together.
I guess there's a bit of a who's who reading it and having an English background. It's a bit of a who's who of historical these days, I guess,
Yeah,
from the 70s, 80s onwards, certainly of British athletics, if not world athletics. But
yeah.
before we get on to some of those characters, maybe, your book talks a little bit about your background and your childhood, and originally it seems like a doctor friend of the family told you that you need to get healthy so you didn't have a heart attack like your father or something like that. And and this prompted your young efforts to seek out some sort of activity. But why running? And I guess afterwards, why coaching?
Okay, yeah. So why running? Yeah, I mean, so as the early parts of the book. I mean, I mentioned that I wanted to do well at sport. I guess most people like to do well at sport, and I think I was quite academic at school, and that was kind of like a given, and I wanted to do well at something that I had to work very hard at. I'm trying to put my mind as an old grown up back into whatever 9, 10, 12 year olds. So and I like the simplicity of watching athletics, and I do. I mean, at age 9, I went to watch an athletics meeting at Crystal Palace, which most 9-year-olds don't do that. And there was something about it that I found kind of fascinating, and I wouldn't say obsessive, but it just captured my interest. And this was well before actually doing any of it. And then at secondary school, age 12-ish, I just I wanted to do well as a sport, and just get in the school team. And the only likely sport where I could get to do that would have been cross country running, as it was then. So I just started jogging, and from a kind of zero base. And just like any beginner at running at any age, you start off at low level, and you make fairly quick gains, because the starting point is so low. And joined a club. I mean, one seminal, I think it's a kind of seminal thing, and it is a true story. But I suppose when I was talking about things being intense and extreme, it's not in the book, because there's enough about Dave Bedford in the book anyway. But the first time I ever tried a club session was 1977. Went to the track in June, and we were told, as we did I think we did 200. So I was, just turned 14. And we said, you make sure you all got to keep lane 2 clear, because Dave Bedford's doing a session in lane 2. And at the time, Dave Bedford, this was the last month of I think it was 4 years. He was a 10,000 meter world
World
record
record
holder.
holder.
So it's literally my first practical introduction. Go down to your local club track for a trial to see if you like it, and the world record holder is there doing a session on the same track. Now, one way or another, I thought I should want to stay in this because most things in life that you do at school, sport, most things you don't just walk down into whatever the activity is, and the best person in the world is in the lane alongside you. So probably something
Hmm.
about stuck, and I thought I want to do what I can rather than just take part. I want to do what I can in a way that I wouldn't have been able to properly articulate at the time. Yeah, my own running, I mean, I use the word career in inverted in speech marks because because I was surrounded by lots of very, very good runners. So I was just a club runner. I would say a mid-pack club runner, which maybe I'm slightly downplaying it, but I think that's
Although,
how I
yeah, I
feel.
think in the UK, being a mid-pack club runner actually makes you pretty fast.
Yeah, yeah. Again, there's history here. Yeah, yeah. So how you'd assess it in 1979 or 1981, it would be a different set of numbers from 2024, maybe.
Yeah, I guess
Hmm.
back in the day, we forget that there were basically no fun runners. There were no.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody
Yeah.
that ran
It
seemed
just
like they ran pretty
it's
seriously.
such a
Yeah.
massive thing now. It's difficult to
Yeah.
imagine it didn't
Yeah.
exist. Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
And there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical. Which is where Caffeine Bullet comes in.
What's caffeine bullet, Liz?
It's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. So, and it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor, and they're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the
Speaking of which, back to the podcast.
Yeah. 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 And I do bring out specifics in the book. So when I say I wasn't any good, I do mention races in what was then called under 20s junior, where I was almost last person in the race. Um, not because I was incredibly, incredibly slow by everyone who goes out to try a bit of recreational running, but I was very, very slow compared to everyone who was still doing competitive running at age 18, 19. So I was with, fantastically successful club. When as I mentioned, I went to university where, as it happened, two of my year group, both from the same school, strangely enough. One of them, he was a fresher and he had just won the English schools senior boys cross country. So he was the best schoolboy distance runner in England by definition. So that was one. And then another guy from his same school, yeah, he went on to run in the Olympics and come fifth in the marathon in the Olympics, and had a fantastic long career as 10,000 meter cross country and up to marathon. So, I knew I saw what good looked like, and I wasn't it. So,
Mm-hmm.
when I kind of assess my running performances, I mean, I'm not, um, I've got benchmarks when I say I was mediocre because I was.
I guess it's all about who you compare yourself to.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and at the time you had all these really good runners, so
yeah,
you're comparing yourself to that. But
yeah,
in terms of just like an objective measure, like in terms of time for a 10,000 or a 10K on the road,
yeah, yeah,
you were quite fast because I think you
yeah.
were running like low 30 minutes.
Well, 33,
30,
33 flat
30.
was my
Yeah.
10K best,
Yeah, so I
which,
mean,
yeah,
if let's say you lived in Montreal and
yeah,
you told somebody that you had in your younger years, run 33 minutes for a 10K. I mean, their jaw would drop basically, like you'd
Oh
be,
yeah, I mean
you
that's
know.
fine. Yeah, I find those conversations. I mean, not quite awkward, but I don't seek out those conversations. Okay, so the person whose jaw drops, if they put themselves in my shoes. So when I was doing if I was doing a 10K road race in the mid 80s, late 80s,
Hmm.
the gun would go, and after 5 minutes or so, a mile, I would look down the road, and there were people almost out of sight. I was
Yeah,
doing my best, and I thought I was, on a fair old cliff, and I just thought, how the hell do these guys, and several of
run
them,
so
you can
fast.
barely see them after a mile. So
Hmm.
yeah, that was to be my jaw-dropping bit.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting though, like how times have changed so much now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I cover that to the extent that I think I've got anything kind of perceptive to comment on, because obviously it's been written about hugely. Um, I mean, if you're from, I mean, North America kind of well, the USA, I guess, more than Canada, but the USA sort of invented the running boom with Frank Shorter winning the Olympic marathon apparently in '72. And I'm not a kind of sociologist or professional at kind of the start of things. But clearly there was the fitness industry and primarily kind of middle class people with a bit of leisure time. But not exclusively that. The idea of keeping fit and trying to I don't know, ward off obesity, all sorts of things
Hmm. Like
came
counteract
together.
your sedentary day
Yes,
jobs. Yeah.
yes. So I guess yes. So the big picture things would be that at this time, the developed world, well, far fewer people were doing physically active jobs. So the number of people doing agriculture, certainly the UK, have carried on falling to close to zero. And of course, the number of people in physical manufacturing, hard physical labour, was also certainly in the UK was falling pretty substantially. So more people had a bit more time, and they clearly must have had more physical energy compared to their previous generation. So running, call it recreational running. It had from a very, very low base. It seemed to take off very quickly. In the UK, it was 79 to 81. It seemed that's when things really, really changed a lot. I mean, Alan might probably he'll probably remember the Sunday Times Fun Run, which was a precursor to the London Marathon by maybe 5 or 6 years.
I
Um,
remember there was no London marathon and thinking, why don't London have a marathon? Boston seemed to have a marathon.
well,
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
Boston was well ahead of the game, and of course but the Boston is a standout, a one-off now because it has this very, very long history that no other big major can compare with because of just the timeline of it. So Boston's a kind of outlier there. So because I've been in sport forever, I've seen all the big changes. And the last few years, again, wouldn't put exact timelines on it, but a lot of people here say COVID has had a huge change in more people taking up running.
I think it did when everything was restricted and all the people that were doing like some other sports, like they kind of came to running because they wanted to stay fit. Because I remember seeing just seeing around the neighborhood like a lot more runners than I used to, and even just like young kids that,
Yeah.
I guess they were whatever, they were soccer players or they do other sports, but those sports were canceled. And
Yes. Yeah.
so
Good enough. Yeah.
and so they started running. So
Yeah.
we used to see a lot more runners. I think some of that has stayed. Like I see a lot more winter runners than I used to. Used to be we were the only crazies, like us crazy
Yeah.
bunch of
Yeah.
club
Yeah.
runners. But yeah, now I'll regularly see someone else cross paths with someone when I'm running in the morning, after dark with headlamps, and yeah, so it seems to be more common, which
Mhm.
is not a bad thing altogether
Yeah.
because sometimes people end up not knowing about the sport coming into it and then finding out they're quite good at it.
Oh,
So
yeah,
it can bring more talent with it. It's not always a guarantee though. It seems like in the UK, there's always been this big club culture. Like there seems like there's a club almost everywhere. Some of these
yeah,
clubs have been around for a long time, and they have
yeah,
some really dedicated and fast runners. And you actually talk about that whole, that whole amateur, like you call it amateur. I mean, I guess they're amateur because they're still working full-time jobs. They're not being paid to run, but they're actually quite fast. And you talk about how hard it can be to make that final little leap to being pro.
yeah.
What makes that
Yeah.
so difficult?
I guess for the individuals who are on that sort of cusp or heading towards it, it's that fine line of it's a risk. I mean, in some ways, it's a risk management thing. Some ways, it's just a purely hard financial thing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, a couple of the guys I mentioned in the book, it's also was no exaggeration to say that they are, yeah, pretty much like the fastest in the long distances, the fastest UK people with full-time jobs. There's maybe one or two others, but endurance runners, athletes slash runners, who are inverted commas professionals trying to make a living out of it. Mainly, they don't get paid very much,
Mhm.
and it's a very precarious way of living. It's a combination of sponsorship, and sponsorship has to be, I joke, you can't pay a mortgage with a pair of shorts or a pair of shoes. So if
Yeah,
people get,
Mm.
it has to
oh,
be
it's great.
money.
Yeah, they've got a kit sponsorship. Okay, well, the kit sponsorship is very handy compared to buying loads of kit, but as you say, it's just the
Yeah.
clothes. That's you can't survive from that. So there's sponsorships, and then there's prize money, and then there might be appearance things. Um, but it's all a bit kind of hard scrabble, and fairly fine lines, fairly fine margins of performance would have potentially
Yeah.
quite a significant plus or minus effect on it staying viable. So in a way, I've said this to numerous people over the years that when they're clearly below a level where it wouldn't make sense to try and take their risk. So in some ways you're lucky because it would you know that you'll never be able to make a living out of running. So you don't have these kind of uncertainties as should I, shouldn't I, because you know that you can't quite do that, and therefore whatever you achieve you are likely to be, I mean, disadvantage isn't quite the word, but you're in a different environment from people who've taken the plunge and are trying to make a living out of doing so.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me draw a little
Yes.
comparison because last year when I went to run the Boston Marathon, I was lucky enough to go and visit Mark Coogan. I don't know if you know
mhm.
who Mark Coogan is.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
he's the coach of New Balance
yeah,
Boston Elite.
yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and we interviewed him a couple of years ago, and he said, "Oh, look me up if you're in Boston." So I did, and I went to tour the New Balance setup there, the coaching setup that he has, and he has 10 athletes,
Hmm.
and he has a complete uh, indoor stadium
Hmm.
basically set up at the New Balance headquarters,
Hmm.
which he shares, but he has access to.
Hmm.
There's the research laboratories for New Balance there. So they're always
Hmm.
trying new kit and new shoe variants on his athletes. Um,
Hmm.
he handpicks the athletes. They're
Hmm.
100% financed. I don't know how much they get, but they're 100% financed. They don't have jobs.
Hmm.
They're 100% financed, 10 of them by
Yeah.
New Balance.
Hmm.
And I said to Mark, well, yeah, but you've got to produce how many gold medalists or majors winners out of that. And he said,
Yeah.
there is actually no requirement. Obviously, if he wasn't successful, there'd probably be
Hmm.
some questions, but
Yeah.
he has no hard deliverables placed upon him by New Balance. So he's 100% financed by New Balance, and
Hmm.
he can handpick, and he's just done that with Parker Valby out of the college
Hmm.
system in the US. He
Yeah.
can go around and handpick the people, not who are the
Hmm.
best in the world, but who he thinks might become the best in the
Yeah.
world. So that's the US sort of the pointy
Yeah.
end, I guess, the pointy end of the US model. Is there
Yeah.
an equivalent UK thing?
Well, as you asked, I mean, very belatedly, I would say we've got a couple of comparable setups. So we've got a New Balance team in Manchester, not unlike what you've just described with Mark
Okay.
Coogan. And then more recently, we've got a team Hoka in
Yeah.
mainly in London. So far, it's men only, well, one woman, and it will expand with probably 50-50 fairly soon. And yeah, they're basically funded by poker, and they've got a coach, professional coach. I'm not sure he's full time. So yeah, they're living as professional runners, just long distance runners. So they're kind of 5K up to half marathon so far. And so the quickest guys I coach, they know the guys in Team Hocker because they've come through the same kind of system and sort
Hmm.
of the same age. Um, and so I hear bits and pieces about it. The financing of it. I mean, I'm not that interested because it's a business thing that I wouldn't claim to. It's not doesn't fascinate me that much. And I just
Hmm.
kind of, I have like, I'm curious. So I'm curious about what the corporate expectations are, not particularly about how much money they've put into it, although it's partly that, but what will they expect to achieve? And I think it'll be these are long distance people, so it's 10,000 meters or marathon, I suspect, for the Olympics, and it's incredible. As I mentioned in the book, these are incredibly hard things to even qualify for. So they will fund a lot of people who are fantastic runners and really well looked after, who may not get to run in the Olympics. And I don't know because it's this is the first Olympic cycle, so I don't know what will happen in 2028. How many might get in the UK team, if any, and what happens if they come 21st in the race, 38th if it's the marathon, whatever. So yes, I mean it's certainly better, at a very kind of purest level. If people have got great talent in anything, you want them to have a chance to fulfill it
Hmm.
because that's very, very fundamental kind of human aspiration. That, and of course that's very
Hmm.
idealistic. And then, as you've been referring to, then you get into the whole scenario of, well, how, what do you need to make it happen? Which gets into one way or another, you get into finance and funding and success measures. And it's a global sport, and arguably the kind of finances of long distance running at a global level, it's kind of twisted in a way by the fact that $20,000 in Kenya or Ethiopia or Burundi is a very, very different beast to $20,000 in, all right, California or
Yeah.
Switzerland. So that, and of course, yes, I heard you mention Michael Crawley a few minutes ago. That kind of links in. That is why when he goes to Ethiopia, he will find
Hmm.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of runners meeting up in the morning because they want to be
Yeah.
professional runners. So it's a different, it almost literally is a different world if you go to different parts of the world.
For them, if they win one race, like they might be able
Yeah,
to provide for their family for life.
yeah.
For you personally, you stopped running a while ago due to injury. What kept you motivated to stay so engaged? Because,
Um,
you're deep in it. You're
yeah, yeah,
coaching
yeah,
and you're surrounded by runners all the time. And sometimes it's hard even for like club runners. They get injured and they just like they hesitate to even go to like some of the social outings because they're like, oh, I haven't been running. I can't hang out with all these
yeah,
running
yeah,
people.
yeah. Well, that. I mean, well, when I was runner and injured. I mean, I had an element of that. I mean, in simple terms, I got injured kind of early 30s. Spent about 7 years sort of up and down, in and out, trying to get back into it to the level I'd been at. Didn't really do it, and then uh, pretty much at age 40, just before 40, it's osteoarthritis in the knee, so very non-negotiable. You can't treat it, you can't operate it. It's degenerative.
Hmm.
So that was kind of, so I couldn't really run properly. And as it's probably come across, like my idea is if you can't run properly, well, what's the point? Because it's not very interesting as I mentioned in the book, and despite everything I said about how much I love the sport and so many things around it, the actual movement of running, the activity of running is, yeah, it's a nice thing, but I never particularly had this kind of
Burning
purity or
passion.
yeah, that
Yeah.
spirituality. I did loads of running because I wanted to do well at it, at a competitive level. I didn't do it
Hmm.
particularly because of a special kind of buzz of running. Certainly not as much as I did on a regular basis. So once I didn't have a chance to do that. It wasn't a particularly intense decision or huge amount of soul searching because I basically it was
Hmm.
very simple. Like this was my sport. I was in the sport. I couldn't do it anymore. Therefore, what could I do to stay in it and sort of stay around, keen, serious runners? And so coaching
Hmm.
was not a particularly left field thing to do.
Hmm.
So I like dealing with like one or two people at a time, have good like depth things with one or two people rather than
Hmm.
huge crowds. So the idea of coaching a person or a few people individually, that
Hmm.
fairly fundamental. I liked that idea because I always read a lot about it. So I thought I would do coaching and in a many similar ways to how I got into running. I thought I would do coaching like as well as I possibly could. Um,
Hmm.
I'd only do it if I could.
Do it well.
Obviously, it's a different dynamic, different trajectory. Lots of things are different from the running itself. But in terms of kind of how I went about it, I was clear that I would want to make. I'd want to be. I want to be quite, by most people's perception of good coaching, I want to become quite good at it, whatever that would involve.
Did that end up being a lot more about the psychology of runners and a bit less about the actual training?
So it's a big question, and yes, I mean, ultimately, and I have this chat with a lot of people, um, and I suppose it's particularly relevant now because there's so much data around, and also artificial intelligence in ways that this that I can only guess at. That's now becoming hugely in the mix. So I will always say that ultimately coaching it's a people service, it's a people role, and more as I kind of get older and have met and coached more people, I think it's not about people's ability, it's not about their commitment necessarily. Ultimately, it's like is it is it someone that you can kind of relate to and both sides. Again, in the book, it's not a coaching, what's it, a pedagogic book in any way, but I thought there's one particular profile that I mentioned of a guy he's an academic in performance sports coaching, and yeah, he did a PhD in performance sports coaching, and there was a much longer title that drilled into the exact minutiae of what his thesis was about, and I was one of his subjects, and it was something like 5 or 6 1 hour, even 90-minute conversations. I mean, it was about me coaching, terribly self-indulgent, but it was about, it wasn't about training minutiae because he was doing it across numerous different sports. It's about kind of what you're trying to do with people and how do you go about it. A modern word that I don't use that much, but it's the word growth, and a lot of it is about growing. So when I think back about how I was when I started, I go about quite a few things in quite a different way than 20 years ago. I mean, you said about psychology, so certainly if I'm talking to like one of the quickest runners that has come to me for coaching, one of the first things I want to know is what do they want to get out of the sport? What's their end game? What's their big goal? Because they've already established themselves as very good, highly committed, training loads. So if I'm gonna be like another person in their daily mix of their life, then I want to know what they think. What are they trying to get out of it? And that's not
Hmm.
it's clearly not a right or wrong thing. It's a very personal thing. It relates back to we talk about professional setup. So where they're trying to head with it. And to me, that's quite a big starting point. And that with that sort of person and that sort of level, arguably, it's a different beast from, you say, I want to break three hours for the marathon. I mean, I know you do it. There's other things you want to do, but that's a a sub three goal as not quite the be all and end all, but that's a sort of that speaks for itself to a large degree. It's when people have put huge amounts to get who know they know they're talented
Mhm.
and they're looking for small gains, and you're kind of trying to get out of them all what what will these hopefully accumulated small gains, what will they mean to you? What do you think you'll get out of it? So I think the people side of it is ultimately that's what I like about it. Again, because I've been doing it for so long, and
Yeah.
writing a book is quite a reflective process.
Sorry, what do these super athletes actually end up telling you? I mean, did they say, well, I just want to get to the Olympics? And you're thinking, oh, okay, maybe you're going to get to the Olympics or maybe you're not. But then you've got
Well,
like
yeah,
50 years after that.
yeah. I mean, I would like,
Mhm.
a couple. There's only a small number that's a sort of sensible question to ask.
Yeah.
So, a couple of the quickest guys I coach. One of them, he's arguably a rawer talent because simple terms, he hasn't done the huge mileage or the bigger mileage that you'd expect for someone who might have the chance to get to the Olympics. He's got more upside, and he's potentially it's a dream worth having. It's for him, it's a dream worth having and seeing where he can get. Whereas the guy who's run 2:15 and he's run for England several times, but you're running for England and running for GB at major champs, it's quite a different, it's a significant step up. So I said, I asked him about that, and he said, I don't see it as realistic, really. And I said at the outset, I said, well, no, nor do I. I mean, you'll get this because you're both kind of, so serious about
Mm.
your own training and different
Yeah.
levels. You'll get
Mhm.
this if 250 if you can do 2:15 you've got some upside, but you'll get the 2 hours 8 for a man, which is the baseline. It's huge,
Yeah.
7 minutes over 2,000 meters. It's a huge difference, and it's not unreasonable for someone at 2:15 with it. You say, well, how can you possibly find 7 minutes by all the things
Hmm.
we might refine? It's not a conversation I have that often because it's a very, very
Mhm.
small pool that are in that.
But there must be at every level the idea that because in a lot of the training books now, they always have like a chapter on like psychology and just
Yeah,
because the thing is if you don't believe you can attain and my old coach used to say this to us like it was basically the fact that like the first step in doing something that you've never done, which is like a personal
yeah,
best, and it doesn't matter what
yeah,
level of runner you are,
yeah,
is you have to believe that it's possible. Because if you
yeah.
don't even believe it's possible, then of course you're not gonna get there, or there's like much less chance.
No, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm like by nature, I'm like a bit of a worrier, and I look for things that why things, yeah, this might not happen because of this. This is, I mean, you're
Mhm.
from North America, and I do for all the
Oh,
things about the US,
we've got a lot
US.
of reasons why things can't happen here in Canada. Like oh, it's -30 today and there's snow on the ground and
But I mean, it's an easy thing to identify, and it's a bit cliche, but the whole USA can do things. So, there's numerous things about how USA kind of is and how it goes about things that I don't necessarily admire. But part of
Mhm.
this, we can win this stuff. We can do this, and I do think, in distance running and track and field and athletics, that I know and follow. There's something about having that is an asset that if you channel it, if you harness it right and you support it right and you get the right people, they achieve great things. So yeah, this thing about don't set any limits, and it's just you talk about psychology. It's something I think about quite a lot with again with people that are A, talented, and B, improving. And when you get those two things together and you're trying to gauge and assess, quantify their rate of improvement, you can undersell them. So I've had a couple of recent cases where I mean, you'll get this because it's a national kind of thing. So national, we had
Hmm.
our national cross country last week, and a young guy coach for a year. So about a year ago, he was about in the area, so kind of the London area, he might have been sort of 15th, 10th, and then in the southern area, so that's like the bottom half of England. This January, he came big cross country race. He came third. Now, if he I before he went to the race, I thought I'm not even going to tell him what to aim at because I think I don't know. I don't quite gauge. I'm not quite sure how quickly he's progressing.
Hmm.
And yet, he's a little bit inconsistent. And he came third, and that was a massive breakthrough 4 weeks ago. So if you come third in the south of England and you go to the national champs, which is all the areas, and because it's the national, a whole load of other strong top level runners who don't do the area champs because doesn't excite them much, they all pitch in. So I wouldn't have said, yeah, try and get a medal again. And he came third in the national, and it's wonderful to see. And I decided well before he went to the national. I thought I might, he's improving. He's sensible. He doesn't do stupid things in races when he's having a good day.
Hmm.
I'm not going to say aim for X or Y because if I had, I wouldn't have said third. I'd have given a less sexy number. Um, so yeah, the psychology of the athlete and how one liaises with an athlete is different scenarios for different people.
It's interesting the coaching because it looked in your book and sort of historically, coaching looked like basically a big volunteer sport. People who
Yeah,
had the desire and then got involved
yeah,
and then just expected to basically coach people for free
yeah. Yeah.
initially. So there's that aspect of it, and you have to put quite a lot of effort into it, and there's a lot of one-on-one type of sort of stuff. Do you have any advice for people who maybe might be listening, who might be interested in getting into coaching?
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the volunteer thing again, I go into this quite a bit of detail in the book. It's changed
Hmm.
hugely, and I'm on both
For the
sides of.
better, I think for the better.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, in many ways, yes. Yeah, it was. When I started, it was a smaller sector, and it was volunteer only, and it was just unheard of to pay for athletics or running coaching. I believe it. No one did it I'd have guessed till before mid 1990s, pretty much non-existent in the UK. And well, the internet did change the world of running coaching because it meant that people could coach remotely. So the changing world of coaching also linked into the changing world of running and runners and society and demographics and disposable income. So yes, it totally makes sense that if you're a competent coach and and you've got a skill and experience that is deemed to be of value, and people think it is of benefit and you know cost benefit to them, it makes perfect. That's just kind of market forces, isn't it? Really, that and then you get into supply and demand. So pe people charge for running coaching, as I do, as well as doing a lot of it for as a volunteer. So it makes sense that's how the world is, and we can't put the clock back. I suppose where I get skeptical about it is because again I touch on this in the book, and some ways maybe the social media world is running away from me. So it's so the flip side of it being kind of supply and demand and market forces, and I would say quite moderately regulated, if it's regulated at all, is that anyone can sell anything, and there's numerous people certainly in the UK who my impression is that they don't actually like the sport that much, other than what they can take from it. It crosses my mind that old JFK quote about, don't think about what you can take from the sport, think about what you could
Yeah,
do for the sport.
yeah.
Clearly I do both. But there's some people who see the sport as their prime engagement with the activity of running is to derive an income from it. they seem, and that's only where they sit. It's probably judgmental for me to say that I don't particularly like that approach.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess it's a factor that necessarily comes with the environment,
yeah,
where if it's possible to earn money, you'll get people who are just looking to earn the money. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
but it, it cuts the other way around as well when you were saying, well, if you're an athlete, and you've got a sponsorship deal for kit, you can't live on the kit. If you're going to be the very best coach and put
yeah.
your 100% of your time and effort into coaching, you can't
Yeah.
live off the sandwiches that the people bring
Old,
you at
old
club
school Harrier.
sessions or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
so
yes,
you're caught at both ends, aren't you?
yeah,
The
yeah,
excellence thing requires you to put your time in to the extent that you need to get paid, and
yeah,
the fact that you can get paid causes the charlatan factor of people who are
yeah,
just out to get the money.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, historically, yeah, a lot of the well-known volunteer coaches who were very successful and hugely committed, a lot of them they had they had they had quite odd lives,
Yeah,
per because just the same way as really really athletics, it's a strange way to live, and I from what I've seen, really driven, committed coaching. I mean the example, the easy example, because it's so much in the public eye, is Alberto Salazar. So,
yeah.
uh, huge. So it's very clear that he is not he's an unusual kind of guy. He doesn't I would say he doesn't seem to have a balanced attitude to life and dealing with people
Hmm.
and ethics.
Mm-mm.
And in one way, that made him the fantastic athlete that he was, and that shaped how he went about his coaching. And of course, it was so unbalanced that it became, to the extent that he was banned for 4 years because it was unacceptable. Now most coaches don't go to that extreme, but many coaches have, I think, have the rest of their waking hours can become, by most people's standards, relatively unbalanced because we're always on WhatsApp, we're always checking this, checking that. We choose to
Hmm.
do, we choose to do it, but it's a calling or vocation. I mean, he said advice for people thinking of becoming coaches. I certainly not trying to put anybody off. But it's a slightly unusual way to kind of manage your time, your life. But in a way, so is serious running, isn't it? I mean, I'm guessing
Hmm.
you're running what, six days, or maybe five, six, seven,
Yeah.
7 days a week. So pretty much every day, you go out and you run for a reasonably long time, and you kind of get fairly tired. Sometimes you get very tired. Now, most people don't do that. So
Hmm.
people, it's a slightly, it's a kind of outlying way for people to choose to spend their time, which again I guess links to why people who do make these choices find it all very interesting about other people that head down the same path.
We're all a group of
Yeah.
weirdos. I think that's in
Yeah.
summary.
If you want to hear like a real headline, yeah,
Which is
yeah,
okay because we have clubs and so we have whole
yeah,
clubs of weirdos to hang
Mhm.
out with when
yeah,
our
yeah.
work colleagues think we're weird.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I kind of I like to downplay the weird a bit in a way because, I'm sure, most of the people who you will know in your clubs, or very many of them, everything on their life CV will actually be quite good. They'll be well educated. They've got families, articulate, they're interested in other things, they can talk about things, so they tend to be quite bright people. Um, so much of what they do is not weird at all. It's actually they're quite sound people, and there's this little bit about them that they
Mhm.
found that, I want to head off down this sub 3 goal, and then push on and push on. I'll keep the work going and I'll take everything else seriously, but I do want to focus on this kind of outlying bit. Um, I mean, there is a case that if you're kind of proper wit, I mean, Salazar maybe is an example. Like if you take things too far, whether it's a runner or a coach, stuff starts to unravel.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, you're as a Gateshead man, have you read Charlie Spedding's book?
I haven't read his book, but you know,
You love it.
I went to Sunderland Polytechnic, and he also did pharmacy there. I'm a pharmacist by background.
All right,
Um,
see,
yeah, and
yeah,
I've said this
yeah,
on a previous podcast that
hmm
we used to do a thing in pharmacology called the Harvard Step Test, where you had to
hmm
do an exercise and you measured your pulse beforehand. You did a constant exercise of stepping up and down, and then you measured your pulse afterwards, and you calculated some sort of fitness measure.
yeah,
And
yeah,
Charlie was in the Charles Spedding was in the folklore of Sunderland University Polytechnic
hmm
because he broke the test because he
yeah,
he had a pulse of I don't know 40 or something, and then he
yeah,
did the
yeah,
test and his pulse was still 40.
yeah,
Basically,
yeah,
the
Oh my
yeah.
exercise
gosh.
hadn't disturbed his system at all.
Yes, yeah, it's like orthostatic, I think,
Yeah,
orthostatic heart
yeah.
rate. Yeah. So he makes the point on this sort of theme that people say that runners have got OCD or that they're all obsessive, and he argues the point. He's a very thoughtful, articulate person writing, and he makes the point that basically if you really are obsessive, you'll fail. You won't get where you want to be because it's like wood for the trees.
Mhm.
You get overly obsessed about minutiae and the wrong things, and you don't see things in the round. And
Yeah.
I thought that's he put it really, really well. So, yeah, the weirdo bit, well, yeah, but it's kind of managed and reflective weirdoness, maybe.
Yeah, I think everybody has their tribe, and
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
uh, this is our tribe.
Mm,
Yeah.
Can I change it up a little bit?
yeah.
You have two chapters in the book about your coaching experiences in one Kenya and two Spain. Why these places and sort of what did you find out?
Yeah, I mean, so the coaching thing, the Kenyan thing was mainly not as a coach. So I visited Kenya, and I suppose the narrative that I draw from it, I guess, is that I just wanted to go to Kenya as a runner because it's
For
where
the
so
same
much
reason
has
I
come
want to
from.
go to Kenya as a runner is I want to experience like I want to see what it's like and
Yeah,
see all
yeah,
the fast runners and
yeah,
experience the altitude and do
exactly.
some hard training. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I went
Hmm.
2001, which was there wasn't really a running tourist industry then. So to without overstating, I was one of the very early people who wasn't a super elite athlete going with the federation as a visitor to Kenya. So I wasn't even coaching then. And I found it very interesting and a bit of an eye opener, partly because it was so kind of raw and primitive in the way we were living. I used that as a starting point. So I got into a strange bu business partnership thing where, with best honestly, the best intentions in the world, that's about four Brits who were all sort of runners and people of similar age and level. We thought we'd set up a camp, have a camp built. One of the guys was actually a construction guy by trade. Have a camp built, and we would have two strands to the camp. We would have Europeans, well, Canadians, anyone from the inverted commas Western world who wanted to come and train in Kenya, but
Hmm.
would come and train, and we'd have everything set up, and they'd pay a kind of a Western related kind of fee for it, and we would have um, a roughly equal number of Kenyan regional athletes who could be based there and have a slightly different infrastructure set up, support, and would obviously pay far less for doing so. And they would, they could do part-time roles for a fee that would be supporting the camp. So um, we very well, I mean, I wouldn't say naively because we knew what we were doing. So We had the place built, and we were an official partnership, and we put the name of the land ownership into the name of the Kenyan athlete who was going to be the camp manager. Um, the reason for doing so was that the partnership still held the land as an asset and the property, and that if it was owned by Kenya, all the work, every bit of financial transaction that needed to be done related to the camp would be charged at Kenyan rates rather than knowing that Brits were paying for it.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, this Kenyan guy, I mean, I'm clearly not going to name the person, but he was very well known, right? And he was very well known, as I mentioned in the book, as a smart, rounded, impressive, honest guy
Hmm.
because he
Screwed you over.
he just basically took the whole place and used it for his own family. Um, and we never saw a penny in it of any description because probably because there wasn't any, and because it was in Kenya, and because of the sums involved they were enough to be really annoyed at, but they weren't really enough to go on a huge sort of legal chase. So that was like very annoying and frustrating, like an
Mm.
illuminating experience of in the world of running.
Especially since you trusted this person. It was like
That's it.
seemed
I
like it
mean,
was a friend, you know?
that's
And
it. That's the way. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, it's that's it. That's part of the use the word jaw dropping earlier on. I mean, it's like when you realize that's what happened. It's like, my God, this is it, isn't it? This is what he's done. And linked. So that was like one kind of narrative strand. And the other thing was that I got involved in some managing some athletes, Kenyan Ethiopians mainly, at a bunch of international elite marathons. Um, so as a coaching friend at the time, this was his job. He lived off this, and so there would be weekends every so often where he had a bunch of runners at two overseas races, and so he could only be at one. So I went to the one that he wasn't at. So that was really novel. I'd never done anything like that before. And when you're relatively new into coaching, it's a different world from what you've seen as a new coach, and certainly as a club level runner. When you're kind of going, you fly to these places. Lahore in Pakistan was the most outlandish one. Um, and you stay with the elite hotel and you meet the group of anything from between about 5 to about 10 or 12 international athletes, East African athletes, and you're with them for the weekend. Yeah, it's hugely interesting and exciting. And of course, as I mentioned, that when if you see a person who you know the sort of village that they come from, because I'd spent some time in one of these places, and you know what incomes are, because it's kind of public knowledge what agricultural incomes are, and you see someone
Mhm.
for a hard morning's work, get $20,000. It's a great joy to see this happen. So.
Transformational.
Yes, it's fantastic. And again, as I mentioned, that there's always these, there's pluses and minuses. So there's always more East African athletes trying to earn a living than can do so.
Yeah.
So there'd be people who had a bad day and he got nothing. Yeah, I don't know the data for like the attrition rate, but clearly there are a lot of people who had good days and bad days. Again, as I mentioned in the book, this was 20, yeah, getting on for 20 years ago. The management of athletes below the sort of super elite level, where there was a more like a trade association. I found it a bit kind of Wild West-ish, in that both sides were worried that they'd be ripped off by the other side,
Hmm.
and I found that yeah, I didn't particularly like this undertone of trying to make sure that you kind of that you're not being led down the garden path by people. Um, so
Mhm.
yeah, I did that for a while. It's very interesting and it's very exciting. But the idea of doing that like big time, that's definitely not for me. Mm.
Yeah, it does seem like there's like suspicion on both ends. Like, I think we heard about it. somewhere else also like that in Kenya, a lot of the athletes, they get agents and the agents aren't always honest. Sometimes they keep all
Mm.
the money.
Yeah, oh yeah,
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 things like that
yeah,
happen. So yeah, it's not the first time that we've heard that kind of thing. So yeah, it's unfortunate though because it's too bad
yeah.
that there
It's
isn't some I don't know. I guess you don't want to add a level of administration to it, but it's too bad that there isn't something like some funds holder that can then distribute the funds, like whatever the percentage is to the agent and then the
yeah,
athlete, so that then you can, the athlete and the agent can just trust each other as people and just have that relationship of, looking out for each other without having all the suspicion behind it.
yeah,
But
yeah, 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 yeah. There's different levels. I mean, the further up you
yeah.
go, the more likely that the people are more professional. Partly they'll have more experience, but I was doing it at certainly below the big hitters, and but yeah, there was a few shady people, certainly certainly some management people from yeah, from what I call it now, I suppose we call it the ex-Soviet bloc as it happens.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
You have a lot of experience with marathons, but
Yeah,
it almost seems like you that's not what you wanted at the beginning. It seems like for coaching, you didn't want to be known as a marathon coach. You specifically specialized in the 10,000 meter. Um, and also, but it seems like you're coaching, a lot of your coachees are, they have aspirations for the marathon distance and as well
yeah,
as these other jobs that you had, like being an agent. It was for a lot of the marathons. So it seems like whether you wanted it or not, it's as if you're being pushed into the marathon area in everything you do.
yeah. I mean, again, yes. So it's like if you kind of exist and operate and work in the sport, you have to, you largely have to go to a logic. You have to go where the sport is. So I mean, Alan from his age and his background in Gates, he'll kind of get this. And that when we were growing up, and he mentioned the 5-star award thing, which I was so pleased to hear about. Um, so when we were young, you got into running and in distance running, and then the marathon was the thing. You worked your way up to the marathon, yeah, because it's so damn far and so blooming
Hmm.
hard that you built up your base so that when you did your marathons at whatever level you kind of progressed to, you'd found your way in the sport, and so you physiologically you were kind of ready to do marathons because you've done 5K and 10K and 10 miles as they were. And oh yeah, I'm not tradition for its own sake, but there was there was a good physical reason for why that was the kind of pathway. And now, again, I'm simplifying and turning it 180 degrees if it's not quite that. But there will be many people whose first ever organized running race is a marathon.
Seems ridiculous.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think it's mad. So and slightly separate again. It's like the perception of the sport and the perception of merit and performance, and so as I've made clear, hopefully in this discussion, and certainly in the book, it's distance running, endurance running that I love and think about a lot. And it's a spectrum, a marathon to me is no more or no less interesting than 1,500 meter race, or 3,000 or steeplechase. But so few people see 5, 10K, 10,000 as its own goal, as its own event that can fulfill everything you want. Everything for so many is seen as a pathway, with the marathon as the only thing that really matters. So I don't like the idea that the marathon dominates to the extent that everything else therefore becomes lower profile because there's
A
only so much
stepping stone.
profile. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so you mentioned about your sub three goal is so for argument's sake, if you were like if you could run 35 minutes for 10K, which is super duper duper, and you did 2:59:50 for your marathon, then all the people who, again, I'm
Yeah,
guessing,
they
the
would be
people,
they would be inspired and awed by the marathon goal, but actually the
yes,
35-minute
yeah,
10K is like
it's,
a much better
yeah,
performance.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's that sort of thing, and so yeah, so it's that
I would
it's
actually take the 35-minute 10K if like if you
Yeah,
gave me a
because you
choice.
yeah,
well,
because you know what the numbers on the
yeah, yeah.
charts are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah. So
Yep.
yeah,
Uh,
yes. If you had a 35-minute 10K and you changed the marathon and you only got 2:59, you'd be gutted because it would be a massive underperformance relative.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So I don't like the idea that, and I did, and so to my mind, thinking people who think of marathon as the only endurance race that, or this distance that is kind of worth having, I often think that's linked to people training poorly for any distance race. Not people like yourself, but get a level or two down. They train poorly for anything that isn't the marathon because they can get away with they think can get away with
Hmm.
poor slash reduced training for anything other than a marathon. And I kind of think if that's how they go about it, then whatever they kind of present for training for a marathon, it will be a much lower base than it otherwise could be.
Yeah, I think that what ends up happening is that a lot of people, because when you start running your first 5K is like a good manageable goal. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so, you can work up to that. And so you do
yeah.
a certain amount of training for that to happen. And then you
Mm-hmm.
end up like running, the next distance and the next distance. But
Yeah,
they don't realize that actually, if you wanted to start running a fast 5K,
yeah,
you
yeah,
do need to do more training and more
yeah,
training. And like in a
yeah.
lot of cases, in terms of mileage, like it might be a little reduced in terms of what you're going to run per week for
Mm-hmm.
a fast 10K compared to a fast marathon. But that's only because like you want to have like a higher intensity. So actually like the training load is probably pretty equivalent, but I think most people don't even realize that because they kind of had like a they had a build up path, and these were just stepping stones to the next distance, and they don't realize that it's actually you can get skilled at that distance, and it's like a whole different demand
Yeah, yeah,
than yeah.
totally that. Yeah, you've exactly. I mean, yeah. So as an aspiring 3-hour marathon runner in the book, I mean, I use a male set of numbers as an example. So because I've seen so many runners at different levels. So I said that the guy's running 2:45, which is very likely a woman running three flat. That they will be pretty as you say, they will be running quite a lot through the year, and as you say, when they're not training for a marathon, when they're specifically not training for marathon but specifically training for 5K and 10K, as you say, they will be doing a fairly similar volume to when they're fully training for the marathon, which means that when they fully train for the marathon, they're coming at it from a good place. Whereas again, you guys, under 40 years old, the people running 3:15-ish, 3:25, they're the typical ones who drift significantly between when they cross the line from one marathon to when they start training for the next one. They do quite a lot less because they're only in inverted commas training for 5K and 10K. I mean, even just a bit of basic science. So, like, if you say marathon's 99 point something percent aerobic, 10K 93, 94% aerobic, 5K 88, 90% aerobic. So, once it's aerobic, it's aerobic. So,
Mm.
so there's a huge amount of transferable requirements across 5K to marathon. So that's sort of one of the links to why I say I'm an endurance coach. I don't say I'm a marathon coach.
Yeah, I heard a podcast with David Roche
Uh-huh. Yeah,
being interviewed. I don't know if you know who David Roche
yeah,
is, but
yeah, yeah,
he's an ultra running.
yeah.
But he's just basically, as he would describe it, science the shit out of preparing for an ultra race.
Hmm.
And and he kind of created an incredulity with his interviewer because he said, basically, my performance correlates with my 5K time.
Hmm. Hmm. Mm.
And he said my 5K time is The best correlated indicator that I have of
Mhm.
how I'm going to go
Mhm.
at this 100-mile um,
Yeah, yeah,
mountain run. And
yeah,
the guys were saying, no, you can't be serious.
yeah,
This is not on. But
yeah.
really, it comes back to what you've just said.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm guessing I know a bit about him, but I haven't deeply. But my guess is ultra running is still a relatively less explored
New sport, yeah.
elite for
Hmm.
elite. I say this facetiously because it won't happen, but it's to illustrate. If they had like a 2 year window where all the money that is currently in the world's majors was reduced to none for argument's sake, and instead all that money was put into 100-mile races,
Hmm.
um, you would see a massive
Yeah, the
upshift
performance would
in
go up hugely.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yes. I mean, you still get this scenario where there's still people that believe, and this is linked to, there's still people who believe that as you get into ultra running, they say women become better than men the longer it gets. And,
Mm.
no, they don't. But because the pool is much smaller, you will still get
Hmm.
some women who can win an ultra race outright.
Outright.
Yeah,
Hmm.
great for them. But the main reason why they're doing that is because no men of comparable male standard happen to be in that race. And of course, once you start rewarding the top levels, then the real nature of things would emerge.
Yeah,
So
there's
yeah,
also that they don't have the same sort of structure where there's like a world major for ultra running. They have all
no,
kinds of like world-class races,
yeah,
but none of them are really like the pinnacle of the sport. They're just
no, yeah,
they're high up there, but it's not like
yeah,
the Olympics of ultra
no,
running,
no.
and ultra running is not in the Olympics. So you have no race where they all of the top level athletes meet at the same time running.
Comrades might be the closest thing to that, I would think, in that yeah, it's 5.5 hours or so. And I don't follow it closely, but I do notice that after 5.5 hours of racing, the front places are pretty squashed in time. So it
Mm.
does suggest that again, but it's largely financially driven the comrades. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
ultras I haven't mentioned them at all, and that probably reflects my involvement in it. I mean, to me, there's a lot of stuff about ultras that, I mean, the David Roach is great that he's taking ultra prep to the next level. And I do, there's a lot of stuff about ultras that is in my view, having never done one, things about logistics and changing kit, the mental side of it. One way or another, I don't know, something I'm going to describe, but clearly, if you're doing something that's taking you 8, 10, 12 hours, the mental side is clearly a different thing from something that's taking you, whatever, 2.5, 3, 3.5. Some
Hmm.
different stuff. Nutrition becomes very different. Hydration, clothing, support along the way. So, I mean, the few people I've coached who've done ultras, so much, a significant part of whether it goes well or not quite so well, a significant part is not aerobic fitness, it's all those other things, organizational
Mm.
skills.
Hmm. Have you had any experience coaching ultras?
Very little. I'll only coach an ultra if it's someone who I've already got an established link with coaching them at marathon. And so that I'll do my best. But well, big thing is I never did one. So if I talk
Hmm.
about coaching marathons, I did quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
So like I said, you might feel like this, or you might feel like
Yeah.
that. Ultra, I don't know how you feel. I've got no idea. So I'm quite honest, and
Mm.
Hmm.
so yeah, it's just not something I've got any particular enthusiasm for. I'm far more interested in 1,500-meter running than an ultra. Just how I am, where I've come from in the sport. Yeah.
You know what the numbers mean, whereas ultra,
Yes,
it's
exactly.
hard.
That's another thing. Yeah, exactly that. Yes, that's a good point. So if you're coaching 5K, 10K, you know, you, if when the person is like, I did this, that, that where they've gone. Well, if you're doing a massive ultra on trail, and they say, what was a good result, and they go, oh, I think anything between 11 and 12 hours. I mean, it's such a massive range. As a coach, you think,
Yeah,
well, I've got no idea. So
big
you've got no
difference.
idea whether you've done a good job with them or not, really.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'm quite honest about that. So as a result, if people are moving to ultras, I suspect I'm not in on their radar, which I'm fine with. Probably fair on
Hmm.
both sides.
I guess you've coached look reading the book through, you've coached at, a pretty darn high level and a lot of people, and you've had a lot of exposure eventually with world athletics in terms of sort of not just coaching, but sort of administrating or advising.
Mhm.
Let me ask you sort of a big generic question.
Yeah.
What's wrong and what's right with world athletics today? And what might
It's
what might
so
be good to see down the track? What would you like to see down the track?
it's so difficult. I mean, like, yeah, because I worked in the national agency for across sport, um, and one way or another, I follow it very closely, and so in some ways, I'm not the best person to judge, and this is where my view is sometimes I think, I do think about it quite a lot. I sometimes think that nearly everybody who works within world athletics, nearly all of them have been elite athletes. So, they are real outliers. They've had amazing careers as athletes, and then they've chosen to go into administration. So
Yeah.
they love the sport. They're steeped in it. So I sometimes think, well, are they the best people to know what is the best way to maintain the sport as it is, broaden it. And I do, if you follow the minutiae of what we call innovations, so many of these innovations, they come in and then they go out, and they go out because they don't work. And to me, it's like, well, how surprising that they didn't work, and particularly when most of the innovations that affect, we're talking about elite professional athletes here, most of the innovations they're imposed over the athletes' heads, and usually the majority of athletes in the event that is affected don't actually want that innovation to happen. There's things, the Olympics had repêchages recently in Paris. So if
Yes.
you get knocked out the first round, you cut all the people knocked out the first round, they come back for another go. And I think what's the chances of someone who gets knocked out in the first round and then has another race to do? What are the
Mm.
chances that they get any further? Because you're just heaping on the disadvantage to them. There's things about long jump with a long jump takeoff zone rather than the specific mark, mixed relays. And my take is that, and again, I'm not the best person to judge, is that just it's very pure. It's how fast can people run, the best people, how high could you jump, how far could you throw this thing? It's so pure. There's very few rules to understand. And now to me that is the framework. That's what you need. And there's so much tinkering. And if people aren't engaged with the sport at the basic simplest level of presenting elite athletics, then changing rules to add complexity, to me, it just seems illogical that people who didn't pick up on it before will suddenly be allured to something that's become a bit harder to understand. One of the things that I pick up in the book about elite athletics, and again, it's hugely subjective, and probably right in the margins of your audience. But I do think that people love to see their nations winning at sport. I mean, I think that's fairly undisputable.
Hmm.
And because of the nature of athletics, that most of the time when people in any country watch track and field athletics, they don't see their nation win because it's too many nations are winning. So you will
Yeah.
mainly see your compatriots. Either you won't see them in the race at all because they haven't qualified, or they won't win because there's
Mhm.
literally dozens and dozens of countries who pick up medals increasingly in numerous events. So,
Yeah,
and
it's like for us here in Canada, we're watching the Canadians in the Olympics. on the track. And if you're watching some of the shorter races, then you'll see like all of the competitors. And so you get to see your Canadian runner that's running like the 200 or the 400 or even like the 1500 for the first few laps because they're kind of all bunched together.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
if you're watching like the marathon, they just focus on the like lead group. And
yeah,
so you
yeah,
only see like the five people that are in the lead, which are not Canadians, you know.
yeah.
So it's hard to, I guess, keep the like get
The
people
national
enthusiastic.
engagement.
Yeah. So again, I just I find that a very interesting. It's not even it's not a sporting question to me. It's like a cultural or societal thing. And again, I'm not the best person to judge because if I watch the 1500 meters Olympic final, male or female, I know that there's 12 amazing athletes there, and I hope it's a good race, and I hope that no one gets busted for drugs. I
Hmm.
really don't care whether it's got three Brits or no Brits. Same with the men's 100. Same with any. If I like watching sport, I like watching the Olympics because it's incredibly high level. And it doesn't really bother me whether Britons are in it or not. And clearly, most people in Britain and any country, most people don't have that ethos. And I mention it in the book
Yeah.
because it came to me in a Baltic trip where like a trip down the three Baltic countries where the tour guide was talking about sport. And because these countries have only got between I think 1 and just over 2 million, almost all sport they watch at world level, they won't be in it
Yeah.
because they haven't qualified. But they will still watch. They watch. They're keen on athletics. They're keen on soccer. They're keen on all the big global sports. So maybe if you're a smaller country, which none of us are, you might have a different sort of set of values about how you appreciate and enjoy elite sport because you see it maybe in a purer way than us with our kind of nationalistic expectations. I don't know. And again,
Or maybe it's something about how they present sport in their broadcasting, you know, because there
yeah,
aren't
yeah,
any like locals from that country participating, so they kind of present it in a different way and they have to make it interesting so that people watch because it is like a global event, you know, the
yeah,
Olympics. So
yeah.
maybe it's something around that, you know, um the bigger countries can learn from.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say that, and I hadn't thought about it in that on that particular aspect. But I suppose if athletics keeps at best kind of keeping a level, keeping the status quo, and clearly the federations they would they always want more. So maybe there's a kind of something different about how they might look at things differently. But it's such a hard. I do think it's quite a fundamental thing, the nationalistic enthusiasm for sport, for particularly if it's a sport, particularly if it's a sport that you don't know particularly well. Most we
Hmm.
talk about the growth of running, which is hugely separate now from the growth of track and field, even track and field long distance. Very very few people who are recreational runners, very few people will tune into the Olympic 5,000 meter runner race, because they're distance runners and they see this part of their sport, part of their world. It's a tricky one. I don't know I mean, the news thing that Michael Johnson's done, where he's kind of almost he's a kind of like he's reducing. He's been almost honest enough to say, and again, you wonder how much his own personal history is related to this. He wants things to be simple, short, sharp, and fast. So he's got a program that
Yeah.
I don't think there's very little beyond 800 meters at all. I think if there's any, I'm not sure there's any throws. I'm not quite sure. I might do it a disservice, but he's clearly decided that he doesn't have a place for the full track and field program. He's been quite honest about that. Yeah, it's an interesting one. It'll rumble on. I don't see that. I don't see it changing hugely. Obviously the USA is this weird example where they are the best in the world by so far. They're so fantastically good at it, and yet there's so little interest amongst the public. So it's like even if you do get really, really good at it, still most people don't seem to care.
And in your book, you mentioned the new European Running Championship that's coming
Yeah,
up in Brussels.
yeah.
I hadn't heard of that, but what's that all about?
It's a strange one. I still don't fully get it. So, I mean, the European Federation, I think, do a really, really good job, and I think their events are great in the end. Traditional in the traditional way, they're great, and they've got this road champs next month in Brussels, which is a good place for a Euro event. And they've over the space of a weekend, it's officially called the European Road Running Championships. And over the same weekend, they've got 10K, half marathon, and marathon, men and women. Um, and in some way that I still don't quite get how what it really entails is that the national teams are teams of it's either 20 or 25. So so in the half marathon, Team GB will be the first 20 or 25 men and the first 20, 25 women who are, I assume, affiliated to British clubs done on time. So there is an
Okay,
elite
and
race in it, but I don't get how this huge team size is kind of layered on to the normal
okay.
three to a team. And I can't
And
there's something
I looked
that
at it on the I looked at it on the net
Mhm.
yesterday because I've just heard of it by reading your book,
Yeah,
and you can I can enter if I want.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
buy a ticket and get into the race.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a European Championship,
Yeah.
but you can pay and go and run if you want.
Yeah, yeah. So if you
Okay,
finish
that's
in the
cool.
top, but yeah, yeah. I mean, so obviously there's an inclusivity element hugely built into it. But is that, is that a good thing if you're trying to establish the best team across the continent in a serious sport? What's what does teams of 20 25 mean? Because I just don't really get it. And I mean, a couple of people I coach have entered it. I say as a joke, you can be part of Team GB or one case Team Australia because he's an Australian citizen. I suppose to me it seems to cheapen it. I mean, in my mind,
Hmm.
it cheapens it. And in my mind, it only cheapens it. And I can see that there'll be numerous other people who would say, no, no, on balance, we think it's a better way of. And if more people think it's a better way of doing it than people think it's cheapening it, then it might stay and progress
Hmm.
different guises.
Maybe the cross country championships has given them a model. I don't know, and they're saying, "Oh, we got to keep up with road racing."
Yeah, I wonder if like some of that team, the idea of having a team, like maybe that's kind of the thinking behind it might be just to sort of make it, um, that people have like a thing to cheer for, because in soccer you have like one team against the other. Maybe they're trying to create something like that where people can root for a team and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, it's the team effort per se is fine. It's
The
the huge
25
range of
field,
team
yeah.
that,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Because
I mean,
of course, if you're running the
Federation.
marathon, you can't run the 5K the day
No, that's
before,
the other
or
thing. Yes,
yeah.
so every race will be as a European Championship. Every race will be relatively weak because as you say, it will inevitably have lost a bunch of people to the other two races because they're all long distance races, and it's in April, which is the biggest month for marathons in Europe anyway. So I mean, to me, the model that the World Road Racing has done, and to me, this is like a good, sensible thing. So they have the World Half Marathon Champs, which is a standalone race, and either just before it or more likely shortly after it, depending on time of day, they have a mass half marathon
Hmm.
that everyone,
Mhm.
with however many thousands the logistics can handle. So you have a separate race, and you don't dilute the World Championships. You add a bolt-on extra event for this, because you've got the infrastructure there. And to me, that's a good thing. You can't argue with that. It's the unifying of the two that I find a bit odd. Um, And of course, there's numerous people who are going to the mass race in the world. You know, they'll again, this is my cynicism. They'll many of them will be on social media, and they'll be going. I'm off to the world champs half marathon. They are, but they're not really. Um,
Hmm.
Hmm.
In terms of just generally, I guess the book, before we get into where can people get a copy and all of that, who did you have in mind as the reader when you wrote the book? Is it more like your own exploration of what running is and has been, um, like according to, your life experience? Or did you have like someone in mind as a person that would read the book and maybe be inspired by it or learn something from it?
Kind of all of those in a way. So yeah, I gave it a lot of thought, and I thought that primarily it would be people who are in the club scene, who are regular runners, who are keen runners, or who have been keen runners. I mean, I thought it would probably be more men than women, partly because the club scene is, it is still tilted more towards men than women, and because I'm a guy, my stories are, of a guy, and mainly, but definitely not exclusively, up from a man's. This is how a male's gone through the sport. So a couple of trends that have emerged since I've been selling it is that on a very kind of pleasing front, loads of the people that have ordered it and have sent me very nice emails having when they've read it, then they're clearly not like high performing runners. They might be club runners, but they're not they're clearly quite modest club runners. One way or another, if it's certain names, you just, oh, I wonder who that is, and you can see their name. So clearly there's loads of people who are for whom this the world of running and athletics that we've been talking about and I've been through, it's not yet their world. Um, and so they kind of, yeah, I mean, I can't use the word inspiring about my own stuff, but they've liked how I've gone about presenting it, and they've enjoyed it, and they've opened their eyes, whatever, to a
Hmm.
part of the sport that they knew very little about beforehand. I've noticed that the people buying it are not as old as I thought they might be on average. So I thought it would kind of veer a bit more towards my age peers, and it hasn't particularly. And I say this like as a sales puff, and it's not meant to be, but one of the things from the emails that I've got from people I just don't know at all, they put a paragraph or two about why they've liked it and what they liked about it, and it's been quite varied, so that's kind of very pleasing. So when you describe kind of what it covers, and it covers a whole bunch of different things, and for different people there's very different aspects of it that they've particularly cottoned onto, that they didn't know about, or they found particularly illuminating or particularly entertaining or informative, or whatever it is. So yes, I like the idea that it has a quite a wide appeal within established runners, club runners. So yeah, I mean, yeah, again, linked to what we've been talking about, the huge diversity of the running world. It's quite hard to target any particular group, but yeah, I had an idea about where it might land mostly.
And it sounds like you were surprised by a few places that it landed, like I guess with younger readers and well, younger
Yeah,
readers
yeah,
than you thought and that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah,
So for people that are listening to this and don't have the book, where would you like to direct them to get their copy?
yeah. So it's all self-published. Currently, so I distribute solely. So it's my website. So it's runcoach1to1.com/products. So the book is the product, or my name, or my name is the author with a kind of fairly unusual name. So yes, it's not available through any Amazon or anywhere else for various reasons of editorial control. So it's from me only. So I send everyone's personal copy out signed. Um,
Oh, that's
That's great.
great. Yeah, that's like an added bonus.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that's really a loan investment, buying a book, because your signed copy will be worth so much in years to come that
yeah.
they can recoup their investment on the book at a later stage.
Exactly so. Yeah, rarity value.
I guess we should try and capture that link and put it on our show notes.
Yeah, I found it. It's okay. I'll link it in the show notes. I found the website.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the cover is a super thing. Writing aside, I do think the cover is a very nice. I'm not sure if you've got a way of showing the
Yeah.
cover, but I think it's such a super design that the guy did. So
What's
mm.
interesting, Liz actually has comments on the cover in her.
Yeah, I
I,
do.
oh, you have the hard
Oh,
copies
that's all
now.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
you've
yeah.
received those since I left the country, so I'm
Mm.
actually working off a virtual copy. What I would like to do is just to thank David for spending time with us. We really appreciate you investing your valuable time and maybe some of your sleep to stay up and talk with us from the UK.
It's fine. I mean, I'm a later to bed person.
Okay,
It's all
that's
good.
good. Yeah, Liz goes to bed just after tea time, basically. So she thinks
So-
everybody else does that as well.
Role model.
Yeah, Alan always reminds me that I'm unique in that way, that in the UK, nobody goes to bed at 8:30.
Oh no, no, no. Yeah, well, but thank you for for taking the time to quite a bit of time to listen to my thoughts and talk around things.
We can just give our summaries now. Liz, you wanted to go first?
Yeah, because we already talked about that. I have thoughts about the cover. So, I really like the cover art because it reminded me of cross country because it's an oval. So I guess you could say it should have reminded me of a track, but it was made up of like ropes attached to pegs, which for me that's reminiscent of cross country. All the cross country meets like kind of just have these streamers attached to these pegs in the ground to mark where you're supposed to go. Just because like they put them up and then remove them right after the race. So I don't know, the cover art just reminded me of that. And the book is all green, so it reminds me of, running on the golf course because that's pretty typical, at least for us here in Canada. Like all the cross country races, it seemed like they were always on a golf course. Um, so kind of reminded me of that. Um, I'll be honest that I had a little bit of a hard time being a Canadian with like the first few chapters because I felt like every few sentences there was a word that I did not know, like O level, or maybe that's zero level. And
No,
Alan is
no,
probably
those are
giggling and
those are those are the exams you do at the end of senior school.
okay. And then there was sixth form, which I didn't know. Is that
Yeah,
like sixth grade?
that's like the CEGEP. No, it's not.
Oh my
It's like
goodness. Okay,
CEGEP.
so I was way off.
Doing
Okay,
some
and then
translating here.
and then Commodore, because this one just reminds me of a computer because Commodore 64,
Oh,
but the context was wrong, so I'm like, I don't
that's
think that's what it means.
that's just some fancy English words.
Oh goodness. Okay, well then. I'm gonna just say for all the other North Americans that read this book, you just got to get past those like first few chapters. Like that is not the trend for the whole book. So just keep reading because you get into all of the stories and the anecdotes and definitely worth reading. The book made me think a lot about the social side of running and how it makes us better runners and better people as well. Um, Even with like training knowledge, I think every runner, there's some basic training principles that you have to get right, but then it's always about trying things for yourself and just getting the right formula for you. And I think a lot of that is inspired by the social side of running. So it'll be either a coach that you have that proposes different solutions to your problem, or sometimes it's just your teammates. You have a teammate that's trying something. Um, whether that's like a new training program or whether that's like a different pair of shoes and it inspires you to try something that you didn't think of to maybe solve a problem that you had that you thought was unsolvable. So that's kind of what it made me think of. And there were a lot of unique topics in the book that I didn't really ever read about before. We did touch on some of them during the discussion, but there's like a lot of stories around them. So about the agents and international racing, and just David's experience applying for different jobs within the sport with UK Sport and IAAF. So it just kind of opens your eyes to all of the different jobs that are out there that just make the whole running world that we know available to us. And it is what it is because of all of those jobs that we actually never hear anything about. So that was really interesting.
My turn.
Yeah, our turn.
All of the above. What I would say is that the books for listeners, the book's UK focused, as David's story basically takes place and grows in the UK through UK athletics, but then to some extent on the world stage with you know, people and events that we would all recognize. I thought it was quite a fantastic insight into how the UK club culture, running club culture kind of works and some of the things in it, like the 12-stage relay that looks like a very exciting sort of competition, amongst other things. The tone has a typically understated sort of British sense of humor that I recognized immediately because I have one. I don't know whether Liz recognized it at all because she
Might have went way over my
went
head. I don't know.
zoom, either went under or over your head. Um, I actually laughed out loud while I was reading the book at the comments about you trying to win trophies when you were out sprinted for the TV that you wanted, and then were disgusted when you had to watch your own TV because you didn't win a new TV, and you had to accept a biro for second place. I thought that, and then complain because it was green or green ink in the biro. I thought, oh, that was fantastic stuff, and only in England, I would say.
Mm.
I'll also noted that you talk about some of the less desirable and more um, underground or maybe undesirable issues around athletics, doping, and you touched on Salazar but whereas you mentioned Alberto Salazar's name in the book, you always seem to avoid naming the culprits. You say, "Oh, there was a person who," or "I came across this," which for me is typical British reserve. The gentlemanly thing to do to some extent. In North America, we would just name and shame, I think. We would just say, this guy. In fact, I found out the names of some of the people because I thought, who is that? I'll look them up on the internet. And so if you read the stories and you go, who's this nasty person who's done this terrible thing that David hasn't mentioned because he's such a gentleman, you can just Google it and it'll tell you. So that's a service for our readers. Basically, the book's a fantastic dip into British athletics history and the coaching structure at the time and the evolution of that coaching structure. So great insights, thoroughly enjoyable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Big thanks to David for providing copies of his book and spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in a future episode, you can leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. You can also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform and get those episodes downloaded when they're out. If you've been listening to us for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you're enjoying the podcast, you can spread the word, tell your friends about us, or share a link to your favorite episode with a running partner. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts where you can actually leave written reviews. We do like to read those, so if you haven't already, you can leave us one. You can also rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. No place for reviews there yet. Maybe sometime in the future. And we're on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy us a coffee if you'd like, or you can just go there and, see what we've posted in the past. We were on another podcast in the past, and the episode is linked there. And there's a few other things. I think a race report from Alan's sub 3 hour marathon and the chapter of maybe his future first book
Yeah, that's going to be a long
is
time
published.
coming, I think, at the rate I'm writing.
Yeah, well, one chapter every 4 years, I guess,
Yeah.
so there might be. But you can read the first chapter or the first story that he posted there a little while back. So that's it for now from Running Book Reviews. Bye for now.
Bye. How am I done?
I don't know how many people actually listen to the outro. They're probably like, okay, this is the end of the podcast.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. We should put something right on the end. If you listen to this, get your free prize from, something like that.
Yeah, first we need some free prizes to give out.